quiet small towns across America, kids saw things at night that adults still refuse to explain. Tonight, you'll hear 7 true, terrifying encounters, each one darker than the last. Welcome to Terrormouth, where the night doesn't just hold secrets, it remembers them. Story 1. The Whispering Barn in the tiny, almost forgotten town of Hollow Pines. Montana nights were longer than they should be. Not because of latitude, but because of the cornfield at the edge of town, and the barn that crouched like a black sentinel in its center. Locals rarely spoke of it aloud. Children whispered stories of shadows that moved on their own, of voices calling names that no one should know, and of those who had dared approach never returning the same. On the night of October 27th, 3 friends Ethan, Sarah, and Liam decided to see the barn for themselves. The dare begins it started innocently. Ethan had found an old flashlight in his garage and waved it in excitement. "I bet it's just boards and hay. Nothing scary." Sarah's hands trembled as she adjusted her jacket. "You really think that's why everyone stays away? Old boards and hay?" Liam, the quietest of the 3, pointed toward the barn. It stood silhouetted against a pale moon. Its weathered planks leaned in ways that defied the wind, and the collapsed roof sagged like a crooked jaw. A soft rustling came from the corn. The tall stalks swayed, whispering, not with the wind, but with voices, faint, sibilant, calling their names. Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered. "Probably just the wind," Ethan said, though his voice lacked certainty. Crossing the field, the kids crossed the cornfield, their bikes abandoned at the gravel road. Each step sank slightly into damp soil, corn brushing against their legs. The moonlight was weak, almost swallowed by the shadows. Then Ethan stopped abruptly. "Look," he said, pointing to the barn's doorway. A figure moved inside. At first, it seemed human, but its limbs were too long, its posture too unnatural, and it glided across the floor, touching nothing. Liam stepped back. That's not a person." The air grew colder. Frost wasn't supposed to be here yet, but their breaths fogged in the moonlight. Sarah shivered. The figure paused at the far corner. Its head tilted unnaturally, then it whispered, "Come closer." The voice wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. It penetrated their minds like a knife, inside the barn against their better judgment. Curiosity or foolishness drew them inside. The barn smelled of rot and old hay. But there was something else, something metallic, like old blood mixed with iron. Beams groaned overhead. Tools cast elongated, monstrous shadows on the walls. Every sound, every creak, every whisper of corn through broken boards was amplified, like the barn itself was listening. Sarah's flashlight flickered. From above the loft, a shadow slid silently along the beams, impossibly thin and tall. Then it split 3 silhouettes, moving independently, yet perfectly synchronized. Ethan swallowed hard. "We need to leave," he said, voice quivering. The whispers returned. Low, layered, incomprehensible at first, then clearer. "Ethan." Sarah, Liam. The kids' names echoed from the walls, the ceiling, the floorboards. Their hair stood on end. Every instinct screamed to run, yet their legs felt like lead. From the loft, the shadows lowered, their black forms stretching unnaturally toward them. No face, only voids where eyes should be. The whispers became commands. "Stay. Don't leave. Join us." The first terrifying sign suddenly, the floorboards beneath their feet groaned. One by one, the boards cracked, revealing a blackness that seemed to go on forever. Ethan grabbed Sarah's hand. "We're leaving now." But the shadows were already on the floor, reaching with elongated fingers toward them. Their whispers rose to a scream, but not a human scream, more like metal scraping against bone. Sarah screamed. Liam bolted toward the door. Ethan and Sarah followed, stumbling, tripping over roots and broken beams. The cornfield outside, when they finally burst out, the barn's door slammed shut behind them, though none of them had touched it. The air outside was thick with fog. The whispers continued, faint but unmistakable, now coming from the cornfield itself. Did it follow us?" Sarah asked, voice shaking. Ethan shook his head, but his eyes were wide with terror. "No, I think it's waiting." They ran all the way back to town, not stopping until the lights of Hollow Pines were visible in the distance. The haunting begins at home, they tried to sleep. But even in their rooms, they could hear it. Soft scraping on the roof above, faint whispers in the vent, shadows in the corners of their rooms, moving independently of the moonlight. Liam swore he saw a small figure crouched in the hallway, watching him. Its eyes were hollow and black, too large for a human child. It disappeared when he blinked. Ethan noticed tire tracks in the gravel driveway that hadn't been there before. For small prints, like bikes, and a fifth track, long, thin, unnatural, leading into the cornfield and ending in empty air. Cliffhanger, 3 nights later. The friends dared each other to return. The cornfield seemed alive, whispering in voices that had nothing to do with wind. And on the barn wall, scratches appeared overnight, deep and deliberate, like someone or something waiting for them to come back. Then a whisper cut through the cold night air. "Right behind them, you came back." The kids spun around. Nothing was there, but the shadows between the cornstalks stretched longer than before, reaching toward them like fingers in the dark, and the barn was waiting. The night of their second encounter arrived faster than they expected. 3 nights after their first terrifying escape, Ethan, Sarah, and Liam gathered at the edge of Hollow Pines. Their parents had warned them against wandering, but curiosity and fear had become inseparable. "I don't like this," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. It's waiting for us." "Then let's get it over with," Liam said. "We need to know what it is before it changes us too." Ethan shined the flashlight toward the barn. The old wooden structure loomed like a dark sentinel, warped by years of decay. The collapsed roof creaked in the wind, though the night was perfectly still. The cornfield surrounding it swayed as if alive, whispering their names. Ethan, Sarah, Liam. Entering the barn again with hearts pounding, they stepped inside. The air was thicker, colder, carrying the scent of decay and something metallic. Every step on the cracked floorboards echoed like a drumbeat, announcing their arrival. The shadows from the first night were gone, or perhaps waiting just out of sight. Suddenly, from the loft above, a figure slid down the beams. Not 1, but 3, elongated and impossibly thin. Hollow black faces stared down at them, mouths open in silent screams. The whispering began immediately, louder than ever. "Stay. Join us forever." The shadow child revealed a faint light flickered in the corner of the barn, and there, crouched near an old hay bale, was a small child. Its eyes were completely black, devoid of any reflection. "It's just a kid," Ethan stammered, but the whispering surged. "Not like you." The shadow child rose, impossibly tall, its limbs stretching unnaturally as it mimicked the movements of the kids. Its mouth moved, but no sound came out till the whispers echoed inside their heads. Sarah screamed, "It's them. It's all the kids who disappeared. The barn's dark secret." The barn itself seemed to breathe, the boards shifting and twisting as if alive. Dust swirled around the room, forming shapes of the children who had vanished over the decades, frozen in time. Trapped in shadows, Ethan realized with a chilling certainty the barn was a trap, a feeding ground for lost souls. The shadow child was a lure, mimicking innocence to draw new victims, and tonight it had chosen them. The chase through the cornfield panic surged. The kids bolted toward the door, but the barn's shadows stretched unnaturally, blocking exits that had been there moments before. When they finally forced their way out, the cornfield was different. The whispers were everywhere, coming from every stalk. The tall shadows reached from the corn, grasping at them, twisting reality as if the field itself were alive. Branches scratched their faces, and the fog thickened, forming faces and hands of long-lost children, silently begging or warning. Desperate escapathan grabbed Sarah and Liam's hands. "Don't look back. Just run." They ran blindly, tripping over roots, their lungs burning. The whispers grew louder, pleading and threatening at the same time. "You can't leave. Join us, forever." A shadow surged in front of them, a towering figure with the hollow child's face blocking the path. But Sarah noticed something. The figure mimicked their movements, almost like it needed their attention to move. She shouted, trembling, "We're not afraid of you." The figure paused. The whispering faltered, breaking the curse, remembering the stories from her grandmother. Sarah yelled, "We know what you are. You're trapped. We're leaving." The shadow child screeched in response, and the barn seemed to shudder violently. Dust and debris flew as the shadows recoiled, retreating toward the loft. With a final sprint, the kids broke through the cornfield edge. The barn fell silent, the whispering ended, and the fog lifted. The aftermath, they reached the safety of hollow pines, gasping and trembling. The barn in the distance seemed normal again, as if nothing had ever happened. But when Ethan glanced at his bike tires, he froze. The tracks from their escape were perfectly mirrored in the soil behind them, except for a fifth set of elongated, thin prints ending in empty air, disappearing into the cornfield. No one spoke of the barn again, but the children knew one thing. The whispering barn was still waiting, and somewhere inside, the shadow child was watching, counting, for the next dare, the next victim, the next night. Story 2. The Whistlers in the Wheat. The town of Millwood had one rule every kid learned before they could even ride a bike: be home before the fields get dark. It wasn't about coyotes or getting lost. It was about the whistlers. No one knew what they were, not really. The stories were old, passed down from grandparents who heard them from their own. They were things that lived in the vast, endless sea of wheat that surrounded our town. A golden ocean that stretched to the horizon in every direction but one, where the sad little cluster of Millwood streets huddled together for protection. They only came out in the absolute dark, and they always announced themselves with a sound, a perfect, piercing, three-note whistle that cut through the still night air. It was a tune you'd never heard before, but somehow always recognized. A melody that felt both alien and deeply, horribly familiar. My best friends, Leo and Chloe, and I had grown up with the stories. We'd mock them during the day, daring each other to say Whistler 3 times while facing the fields. But as the sun bled out over the golden stalks, turning them to a deep, bloody umber, the jokes would die in our throats. We'd all pedal a little faster for home. The incident happened the summer we turned 15, the summer we felt brave and stupid and immortal. It was the night of the Millwood Fair, the one night a year the unspoken rule was temporarily suspended. The fairgrounds were on the far eastern edge of town, a half-mile walk through a narrow dirt path that ran between two vast fields of wheat, already tall and ready for harvest. The three of us had stayed late, riding the rickety Ferris wheel until the operator shut it down, our pockets empty of tickets and our stomachs full of fried dough. By the time we decided to head home, the fair was a dying constellation of lights behind us, and the world was plunged into the profound country darkness that city people can't even imagine. There were no streetlights out here. The only illumination was a sliver of a moon and the frantic beams of our flashlights dancing over the hard-packed earth of the path. We were laughing, replaying the highlights of the night, our voices too loud in the crushing silence. That's when we heard it. It came from the wheat field to our right. Not distant, but close. Alarmingly close, just a few yards into the stalks. A perfect, crystal-clear sequence of 3 notes. High, low, and then a mid-tone that seemed to vibrate in the back of our teeth. It wasn't played on any instrument we knew. It was pure, vocal, and utterly wrong. We froze. The laughter died instantly, sucked into the void left by that sound. Our flashlights, as if moved by a single terrified thought, snapped toward the source. The beams cut into the dense wall of wheat, illuminating a few feet of swaying stalks. But there was nothing there. An animal, Leo whispered, his voice cracking. A bird or something. A weird bird. We all knew it wasn't a bird. We stood there for a full minute, not breathing, hearts hammering against our ribs. The night was silent again. Just the dry rustle of the wheat in a slight breeze. The collective breath we'd been holding began to ease out. Then it came again, this time from the left. The exact same 3-note sequence, the same piercing clarity, the same impossible melodic wrongness. It was closer this time. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through us. "Run," Chloe breathed, and it was all the command we needed. We ran, our feet pounded on the dirt path, our flashlights jerking wildly, creating a nightmare strobe effect of flying dirt and looming darkness. The wheat on either side was a solid, whispering wall, and I felt, more than saw, things moving within it, keeping pace with us. We weren't alone, and then the whistling began in earnest. It didn't come from one place, it came from everywhere. To our left, our right, ahead of us, behind us. The same 3-note call, echoed and overlapping, a dissonant choir hidden in the gold. They were herding us, corralling us down the path. We were mice in a maze, and the cats were singing their song. Tears streamed down Chloe's face, her sobs lost in the sound of our ragged gasps and the omnipresent whistling. Leo was swearing a continuous, terrified stream of profanity. My flashlight beam hit something, a head-old man, hemlocks, broken-down grain silo, a rusted cylindrical tomb that stood just off the path, a landmark that meant we were halfway home. It was a place of dares during the day. Now it was a sanctuary. The silo, I screamed over the horrific symphony. Get inside. We scrambled off the path, our legs burning, and shoved our way through the waist-high weeds surrounding the structure. The small access door at its base was half-rotted, its lock long broken. Leo yanked it open with a shriek of protesting metal, and we piled into the pitch-black interior, slamming the door shut behind us. The inside was a cathedral of darkness and dust. Our 3 flashlight beams shot upward, crisscrossing in the immense, hollow space. The air was thick with the smell of decayed grain and rust, but it was quiet. The whistling was muted outside. We were safe. We collapsed against the curved metal wall, gulping in air, trying to slow our racing hearts. The terror was still there, a live wire in our chests, but it was tempered by the solidity of the walls around us. What were those things? Chloe whimpered, hugging her knees to her chest. Before anyone could answer, a new sound began, scratching. It was a slow, deliberate scraping, metal on metal. It started near the door, then moved upward. Then another started on the other side of the silo. Then another, directly above us. We pointed our flashlights frantically, the beams skittering across the corrugated walls. We saw nothing but rust and decay. The scratching grew faster, more frantic. It was circling the silo, climbing it. Dozens of them. Hundreds. It was the sound of claws, long, sharp claws, scraping their way up the outside of our metal tomb. We huddled together in the center of the floor, our backs to each other, shining our lights in every direction, watching for any breach, any sign of entry. The scratching was a deafening rain of nails on a chalkboard made of metal, rising to a fever pitch, and then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence was more terrifying than the noise. It was a waiting, hungry silence. The only sound was the ragged sound of our breathing and the frantic thump of our hearts. That's when we heard the breathing. It wasn't ours. It was a wet, rattling inhalation coming from right outside the metal wall by my ear. It was followed by a slow, drawn-out exhalation that fogged a small spot on the metal, making it gleam for a second in my flashlight beam. They were right outside, pressed against the walls, waiting. We didn't move. We didn't speak. We barely breathed. We stood there, frozen in a terror so complete it felt like dying. The first dent appeared about 10 feet up. It was as if a tremendous force had been applied from the outside a fist, or something much harder. The metal groaned inward with a sharp pop. Then another dent, lower down. Then another directly opposite us. Pop, pop, pop. They were testing the walls, probing for weakness. Terror finally overrode our paralysis. We were going to die in this rusted can. Leo let out a strangled cry and pointed his flashlight at the access door we'd come through. The path, we have to make a run for it. It was suicide. But staying was a slower, more horrifying death. On a count of 3, Leo wrenched the door open. The whistling immediately swelled, a triumphant, deafening blast of sound. We burst out into the night and ran, not looking back, our legs pumping on pure adrenaline. The whistling followed us, but the scratching, the dents, the breathing, they stopped. It was just the song now, a terrifying celebration of our flight. We didn't stop until our feet hit the paved road of town, until the yellow glow of a porch light washed over us. We collapsed on the curb, vomiting from fear and exhaustion. We never spoke about it again. Not to each other, not to our parents, not to anyone. But sometimes, on a perfectly still night, when the wind is just right, I can hear it. Faint, from miles away, carried from the endless sea of wheat. A perfect, 3-note whistle. And I know they're not just in the fields. They're in the silence, and they remember us. Story 3. The man who stood under the streetlight in the tiny farming town of Red Hollow, Iowa. Nothing ever happened after dark. That was the rule. By 9 p.m., porches went dark. By 10, the streets were empty. And by midnight, Even the dogs stopped barking as if they knew something humans didn't. Every kid in Red Hollow grew up hearing the same warning. If you see someone standing under the streetlight at night, don't look at their face. No one explained why. The night everything changed was late August, when Caleb Turner, Mason Reed, and Noah Pike decided to sneak out. They were all 13, old enough to feel brave, young enough to be stupid. Caleb lived closest to County Road 6, a long stretch of cracked asphalt that cut through cornfields and ended at a single flickering streetlight. That streetlight had been broken for years, except sometimes, inexplicably, it turned on by itself. That night, it was on. Mason noticed it first. "Why is the light on?" he whispered. The bulb buzzed faintly, casting a pale yellow circle onto the empty road. And standing directly beneath it, after the night at Caleb's window, nothing in Red Hollow felt normal again. The town looked the same in daylight, cornfields stretching endlessly, mailboxes leaning at odd angles, the same rusted pickup trucks parked outside the same houses, but something had shifted beneath the surface. The kids could feel it, like the town itself was holding its breath. Caleb stopped sleeping every night at 12:17 a.m. Without fail, the temperature in his room dropped. His breath fogged the air, and though he never looked, he knew something was standing just beyond the glass, watching, smiling. The pattern revealed 3 days later. Mason came over, pale and shaking. "He's outside my house now," Mason whispered. "Not every night, just standing across the road, under nothing, no light. But I can still see him." Noah arrived moments later, eyes red, voice trembling. "My dad says I'm imagining things," he said. "But the dogs won't go outside anymore. They sit at the door and whine at exactly 12:17. That was when Caleb realized something terrifying. The man wasn't haunting one. House Totty was moving. The old newspaper, they found answers. In the last place anyone ever went, the Red Hollow Historical Society. A single-room building that smelled like dust and rot in a locked filing cabinet, buried beneath decades of church bulletins and farm reports, was a yellowed newspaper dated October 14th, 1949. The headline read, "Local boy found dead near County Road 6. No cause determined." The photograph beneath it made Mason gag. The boy looked about 13.2 thin, eyes wide open, mouth stretched into a grin that didn't belong on a dead face. The article said the boy had been found standing upright beneath the streetlight despite being dead for hours. Witnesses claimed his shadow had remained even after the sun came up. The boy's name was Elliot Crane. What really happened to Elliot Craneforth? Records revealed the truth no one in Red Hollow ever admitted. Elliot had been dared to stand under the streetlight at night. Just once. He stood there for hours. When his parents came looking, they found him frozen in place, as locked on something only he could see. Doctors said fear killed him. But fear doesn't leave footprints, and fear doesn't smile. The rules were clear, written in a margin of the file, in shaky handwriting, were 4 rules passed quietly from generation to generation. Never look at his face. Never speak to him. Never stand under a light at night. If he knows your name, it's already too late. Caleb felt sick. He had broken the first rule. The final night, man came for Caleb 5 nights later. Not tapping, not whispering, just standing right outside the front door. The porch light flickered violently, casting a warped shadow across the lawn that bent in the wrong direction. Caleb watched from the stairs as his father approached the door. "Who's out there?" His dad called. The man lifted his head. Caleb screamed, "Don't look at him." Too late, his father froze mid-step, eyes wide, mouth slowly stretching into a grin that didn't belong to him. The porch light exploded. Darkness swallowed the house, breaking the gaze in pure instinct. Caleb did the only thing he could think of. He turned on every light inside the house at once. The man recoiled for the first time. The smile faded, because the thing under the streetlight needed darkness and focus. It fed on attention. On being seen, Caleb grabbed his dad and dragged him backward, slamming the door shut. Outside, something screamed not loud, but deep, like metal twisting underground. When the sun rose, the lawn was empty. No footprints, no shadow, the town's final silence the next day. Red Hollow quietly removed every remaining streetlight. No announcements, no explanations, just darkness. People stopped walking at night, altogether. Caleb's father never remembered what he saw, but sometimes, when the house grew quiet, his mouth would twitch, as if remembering how to smile, the truth that remains years later. Caleb moved away, but he still wakes up at 12:17 a.m., heart racing, because sometimes on long, empty roads he'll see someone standing just beyond his headlights, not under ASTREETLIGHT, not in the dark, but right at the edge of vision, waiting. Was a man the figure under the light at first? He looked normal, tall, thin, wearing what seemed like old-fashioned clothes, dark trousers, a buttoned coat, polished shoes that reflected the streetlight unnaturally well. He wasn't moving, not swaying, not shifting weight, just standing perfectly still, facing the road. Noah swallowed hard. Is he waiting for someone? Caleb raised his binoculars. His dad's old hunting parand froze. "Guys," he whispered, "something's wrong." The man's head was tilted slightly downward, as if staring at the ground. His arms hung straight at his sides, fingers too long, too straight, and he wasn't blinking. The rule comes back. Mason suddenly remembered his older sister's voice, years ago, shaking as she spoke. "If you see him, don't look at his face. He knows when you do." Mason lowered his eyes instantly, but Caleb didn't. He adjusted the binoculars and zoomed in. That's when he saw the smile. It was too wide, stretched unnaturally across the man's face, frozen, unblinking, and then the man's head snapped upward, directly toward Caleb. Eye contact. The binoculars slipped from Caleb's hands. The man's eyes were completely black. No whites, no reflection, just empty darkness. The streetlight flickered violently. Noah screamed, "Run!" They bolted back toward Caleb's house, hearts pounding, shoes slapping against the pavement. Behind them, the light went out with a sharp pop, but the buzzing didn't stop. It followed them. Something followed them home inside Caleb's room. They locked the window and killed the lights. No one spoke. Minutes passed, then dash, tap, something. Lightly touched the glass, tap, tap, slow. Patient. Caleb's breathing became shallow. Mason covered his mouth to keep from crying. Noah whispered, "Don't look. Don't look." The tapping stopped. Silence. Then a voice, soft, calm, and much too close, spoke from just outside the window. You weren't supposed to look at me. The voice knows their names. Caleb felt his blood turn cold. How do you know my name? He whispered. The voice chuckled softly. I know where you sleep. I know which one of you pretends not to be afraid. And I know which one looked first. The doorknob downstairs slowly turned, once, twice, then stopped. What the parents never saw the next morning. Caleb's parents found muddy footprints beneath the window. Only one set. No toes, no heel, no heel. Just long, smeared impressions, as if something had dragged itself away rather than walked. The streetlight at County Road 6 was smashed later that day. The town replaced it. It never turned on again, but Caleb knew the truth, because every night after that, at exactly 12:17 a.m., his room grew colder, and from the darkness outside his window, he could feel something standing there, smiling, waiting. Story 4. The Echo in the Ironwood in the small town of Ironwood Ridge, Michigan. There was a rule every kid learned before they learned how to ride a bike. If you hear your name echo from the woods at night, don't answer. The adults never explained why. They just said the same thing every time. Sound travels strange through Ironwood. But the kids knew better, because Ironwood Forest didn't echo voices. It copied them. The forest that watched Ironwood Forest bordered the edge of town, thick with ancient trees whose trunks were dark and twisted like frozen bodies. Even during the day, sunlight struggled to reach the ground. At night, the forest became something else entirely. Sounds didn't behave normally there. A snapped twig might repeat itself minutes later. A laugh could come back wrong. And sometimes, voices returned when no one was speaking anymore. That was why no one went near Ironwood after dark. No one except kids. The night of the Derrick was early fall when Lucas Bennett, Owen Hart, and Emily Cross rode their bikes to the forest edge just before sunset. Lucas had heard something the night before. I swear, he said, adjusting his backpack, I heard my mum calling me. From the trees, Emily crossed her arms. That's not funny, I'm not joking, Lucas replied. It sounded exactly like her. Owen swallowed. You didn't answer, right? Lucas shook his head quickly. No, I remembered the rule. The three of them stood at the tree line as darkness crept in. The wind whispered through the branches, low and constant, like breathing. Then Lucas. Emily flinched. Owen's blood went cold. The voice was soft, familiar. It sounded like Lucas's mother. The first echo Lucas's heart pounded. That's not her. The voice came again, clearer this time. Lucas, come here. I need you. It came from inside the forest. Emily grabbed his sleeve. Don't answer it, please. The trees stood perfectly still. Then another voice joined it. Owen. Owen froze. That's my dad's voice. A third followed. Emily. Her knees nearly buckled. 3 voices. Perfect copies. Calling from 3 different directions. The wrong silence. They backed away from the forest edge. No footsteps followed. No movement, just silence. Then the wind stopped completely, and from deep within Ironwood Forest, something else echoed back, not a voice, but the sound of breathing, slow, heavy, too close. Lucas whispered, it's not just copying us. The breathing echoed, again closer this time. The shape between the trees. Owen pointed into the darkness. Between the trunks, something moved, not walking, sliding, a tall shape, darker than the shadows around it, shifting from tree to tree without sound. Its outline was wrong to thin in places, too wide in others, like it couldn't decide what shape to be. Then it stopped and spoke, but this time it used all three of their voices at once. "Why won't you answer us?" Emily screamed. Running wasn't enough, they ran. Branches clawed at their clothes. Roots tripped their feet. Behind them, the forest erupted with sound footsteps, laughter, crying, shouting, all layered, all familiar, voices of parents, voices of teachers, voices of kids who had moved away or vanished. The echoes chased them all the way to the road. The moment they crossed it, the sounds stopped, dead, as if the forest had hit an invisible wall, the mark of ironwood. They didn't speak on the ride home that night. Lucas lay awake, staring at his ceiling, at exactly 2:43 a.m. He heard it, a whisper, right beside his bed, using his own voice. "You heard us. Now we can hear you." The next morning, Emily found muddy footprints outside her window. They weren't human. They looked like sound had pressed itself into the dirt. The truth no one admits by the end of the week. All three noticed the same thing. Whenever they spoke alone at night, something whispered back, not immediately, but eventually, always repeating their words, always slightly wrong, and always coming from the direction of Ironwood Forest. Asterisk after that night. Ironwood Ridge began to change, not visibly, not immediately, but the town grew quieter. People paused before speaking, as if weighing their words. Conversations ended abruptly. Radios were turned off. Televisions muted. At night, even the wind seemed to lower its voice, because everyone had heard something. The voices that followed Lucas noticed it first. When he spoke, alone really spoke. Whispering thoughts under his breath, something answered not right away. Minutes later, sometimes hours, always in his own voice. "I'm tired," Lucas whispered one night. From the open hallway, a delayed reply came back, warped and hollow, tired. He slammed his bedroom door shut and didn't open it until morning. Emily's experience was worse. Her echo didn't repeat words, it finished sentences. "Wish it would stop," she muttered while brushing her teeth from behind her. In the bathroom mirror, her own voice replied softly, listening. The reflection didn't move its lips. The old man who wouldn't speak. The answers came from Mr. Halvorsen, the oldest man in Ironwood Ridge. He lived alone in a cabin near the forest edge and had not spoken aloud in over 30 years. When the kids knocked, he opened the door silently and stared at them with pale, sunken eyes. Lucas swallowed. We heard the echo. Mr. Halvorsen's hands trembled. Slowly, he stepped aside and led them inside. On the walls were notes, scratched into wood, paper, even glass. "Do not answer, it learns it borrows, you." He handed them a notebook. Inside was the truth. Ironwood Ridge buried. What the echo is, the echo was not a spirit. It was older, before the town existed. The forest had been a gathering place for the Anish, where voices were used in rituals meant to call answers. From the land itself, something answered back, but it was never meant to. The echo learned language by stealing it. It learned form by copying shadows. And it learned hunger by listening to children, because children spoke honestly when someone answered the echo willingly. It didn't take their body, it took their voice, and eventually, Their place, the first child who answered the notebook described a boy who had disappeared in 1912. He answered his father's voice in the woods. He came home that night, but he never spoke again. Over time, his voice returned only when no one was looking, always from somewhere else. That boy became the first mouth of the echo. The choice the echo wanted Lucas. He had heard it first. He had thought about answering that made him open. That night, at 2:43 a.m., all three kids were woken by the same sound. Knocking, not on doors, on walls, on floors, inside their heads. Then the echo spoke, not copied, not delayed but together, using dozens of voices layered into one. Come to the forest. We will give you silence. The final walk into Ironwood, they met at the tree line before dawn. The forest was unnaturally still. No insects, no wind, no birds. As they stepped inside, the trees leaned inward, trunks stretching like ribs closing around them. Every voice the kids had ever known whispered from the dark. Parents, friends, teachers, themselves. At the center of the forest stood a clearing, and in it nothing. No creature, no shape, just sound, pressing in on them from all directions. Breaking the echo, Lucas remembered one final note from Halvorson's book. It cannot copy what is never spoken. He opened his mouth and screamed. Not words, not sound, just raw breath. Emily and Owen joined him. The forest, convulsed. The voices shattered into noise. Then silence. The trees shook violently as if rejecting something ancient. For the first time, Ironwood Forest did not echo what was lost when they crossed the road at sunrise. The forest exhaled. The echo was gone, mostly Lucas. Survived, but he never whispered. Again. Emily lost the ability to hear her own thoughts. Owen sometimes hears replies that no one else does. The forest still listens, Mr. Halvorson died the following winter. With him went the last warnings. New families moved to Ironwood Ridge. Children learned new games, and sometimes late at night someone hears their name drift from the woods. Clear, familiar, inviting, because the echo was never destroyed. It was only taught to wait. Story 5. The Birch Sentinel for the Kids of Oakhaven. A town so small it barely earned a dot on the state map. The old Miller property was the absolute frontier of fear. It wasn't just the decaying Victorian house that sat on the hill, though that was bad enough. It was the single, ancient paper birch tree that stood sentinel in the center of the vast, overgrown front lawn. Local legend called it the Birch Sentinel, and the story went that Old Man Miller hadn't just planted it. He had become part of it. After his wife vanished decades ago, he grew reclusive and strange, whispering to the sapling day and night. When they found him dead at its base one morning, his heart having given out, his hands were buried deep in the soil, as if he'd been trying to push the tree's roots aside. The rule was simple, passed down through generations of Oakhaven children: never look at the Birch Sentinel at night. During the day, it was just a tree, albeit a pale and unnerving one. But after sunset, it was said to change. Lena, new to town and fiercely rational at 15, thought it was the dumbest superstition she'd ever heard. Her younger brother, Sam, 12 and far more impressionable, believed every word. It's not a superstition. It's a rule, Sam insisted one humid Friday evening. staring out their kitchen window at the distant, ghostly white trunk glowing in the moonlight. Billy Carson said he looked at it once and saw a face in the bark. A sad, screaming face. Billy Carson also said he wrestled a bear, Lena retorted, scrubbing a dish with more force than necessary. It's a tree, Sam. It photosynthesizes. It doesn't steal souls. But a dare is a dare. Later that night, egged on by her new, skeptical friends over a grainy video call, Lena made a decision. She would prove them all wrong. She would go to the Miller property, look directly at the Birch Sentinel at midnight, and livestream the whole boring thing. Sam, hearing her creep down the stairs, intercepted her at the door. "You're not going," he whispered, his face pale. "Lena, don't. Go back to bed, chicken," she said, though a part of her was glad for the company. "I'll be back in 20 minutes, with proof that this town is nuts." The walk to the Miller property was a symphony of dread. Every rustle in the dry summer grass was a predator, every hoot of an owl a mournful warning. The air grew colder the closer they got to the property line, a deep, unnatural chill that clung to their skin. Sam followed 10 paces behind, too terrified to let his sister go alone. They reached the rusty iron gate hanging off one hinge. The house loomed on the hill, a jagged silhouette against the starry sky. And there, in the center of the sea of uncut grass, was the tree. The Birch Sentinel. It was wrong. Lena's scientific certainty began to crack. In the moonlight, its bark wasn't just white. It was luminous, like bone bleached by a dead sun. The black scars and knots that peppered its trunk didn't look random. They looked like closed eyes, like twisted mouths frozen in silent agony. "Lena, please," Sam begged from the gate. "Let's go. It's watching us." "Don't be ridiculous," Lena said, her voice trembling. She fumbled with her phone, opening the live stream. "It's a tree. It doesn't have eyes." She held the phone up, the screen illuminating her face. The digital clock on her stream hit 12 a.m. A sharp crack echoed through the silent night. Like a gunshot, it came from the tree. Lena's phone wavered. She focused the camera. One of the black knots, about 6 feet up the trunk, had split open. It wasn't sap that oozed out, but a thick, dark substance that looked unsettlingly like blood. And in the center of the split, something glistened. Something wet. It was an eye. It was a huge, human eye, milky and unblinking, staring directly at her. It swiveled slowly in its socket of bark and bleeding wood, tracking her every minuscule movement. Lena's breath hitched in her throat. A scream built, but no sound came out. This was impossible. This was insane. Another crack, lower down. Another not split, and a mouth tore itself open in the bark, lips peeling back from splintered wooden teeth. A low guttural moan emanated from it, a sound of profound, earth-shattering sorrow that vibrated in Lena's bones. It wasn't the wind. It was a voice, alone. The mouth groaned, the words stretching out into a wretched sigh. So alone. More cracks peppered the air, a horrifying popcorn sound of rupturing bark. All across the trunk, eyes snapped open. Mouths yawned wide, whispering, crying, begging in a dissonant chorus of lost voices. The tree was no longer a tree. It was a column of tormented souls trapped within its pale prison. The whispers began to coalesce, slithering through the cold air directly into their minds. "Stay. With us. The roots are so cold. See what we see. Forever." Lena felt a terrifying pull, a gravitational force drawing her toward the tree. Her feet, moving of their own volition, took a step forward. Then another. The grass crunched under her feet, loud as firecrackers in the oppressive silence. "Lena, no." Sam screamed, breaking the tree's hypnotic hold on him. His cry broke her trance. She stumbled backward, tripping over a hidden rock and landing hard. The phone flew from her hand, the live stream now showing a chaotic, spinning view of the grass and the monstrous tree above. As she lay there, paralyzed with fear, she saw it. The roots. They weren't buried in the ground anymore. Thick, pale tendrils, like the fingers of a buried giant, were pushing up through the soil, slithering through the grass toward her. They moved with a horrible, sinuous life, seeking, hunting. One root, slick with dark mud, wrapped around her ankle. It was ice cold and impossibly strong, pulling her toward the tree with a steady, relentless force. "Get off!" She shrieked, kicking and clawing at the dirt. Sam didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, not toward the tree, but to where her phone lay. He snatched it up, and acting on a primal instinct, he didn't point it at the tree. He turned the camera on himself, his face a mask of sheer terror, illuminated by the phone's ghostly light. The moment his face filled the screen, the tree reacted. Every single one of its dozens of eyes swiveled away from Lena and fixed on Sam. The whispering stopped. The groaning ceased. The entire horrific entity focused on the new, fresh face held captive on the small screen. The root around Lena's ankle went slack in that split second of distraction. She scrambled free. She grabbed Sam's arm, and they ran. They ran without looking back, the sound of splitting wood and an enraged, collective scream chasing them through the darkness. They burst through their front door, collapsing on the floor, sobbing and gasping for air. They were safe. They were home. It was only the next morning, as the sun shone bravely on a normal world, that Lena found it. Curled up in her bed, unable to sleep, she checked her phone. The live stream had ended when the phone died, but it had recorded. She scrolled back to the moment Sam had saved her. The moment he had turned the camera on himself. There he was, his young face terrified. But behind him, in the background, clearly visible over his shoulder, was the birch sentinel, and in its bark, among all the other anguished faces, was a new one. A fresh knot, still seeping dark fluid. It was small. It was new, and it looked exactly like Sam. Story 6. The faces in the water tower in the small desert town of Dry Creek, Arizona. The water tower stood taller than everything else. It was old, rust-stained, and visible from almost every street during the day. It was just another landmark sun-bleached metal, peeling paint, pigeons nesting near the rim. But at night, kids didn't look at it. The rule nobody wrote down, every child in Dry Creek learned the rule without being told. Never look at the water tower after midnight. No one knew who started it. Parents dismissed it as nonsense. Teachers laughed it off, but kids obeyed it, because sometimes, late at night, the tower looked back. The first sighting it was Evan Morales, age 12, who broke the rule. He had trouble sleeping and liked to sit by his bedroom window, counting stars to calm his thoughts. At exactly 12:04 a.m., his eyes drifted toward the horizon, toward the water tower. The moon was low, casting silver light across its curved surface. That's when Evan noticed something wrong. There were faces reflected in the metal at first. He thought it was a trick of the light. Then one of them blinked faces. That didn't belong. Evan leaned closer to the glass. The faces were pale, distorted, stretched like reflections in warped mirrors, but unmistakably human. Some were children, some were adults. All of them were pressed outward, as if trapped beneath the metal, their mouths open in silent screams. Then one face turned its eyes directly toward Evan's window and smiled. The night watchers the next day. Evan told Maya, Trevor, and Cole, his closest friends. They laughed at first, until Trevor admitted something in a whisper. I've seen them too. Just once, when I was younger. Maya's skin prickled. My brother used to wake up crying about faces in the tower, before he moved away. That night, the four of them met at the edge of town. Bikes hidden behind an abandoned gas station. The water tower loomed above them, silhouetted against the stars. Quiet, still waiting, midnight at the Towers. The clock on Trevor's phone ticked over to 12 a.m. The air changed. The metal of the tower began to creak softly, like it was expanding, or breathing. A low humming filled the air, vibrating in their chests. Maya whispered, "Do you hear that?" Cole nodded. It's like voices underwater. Slowly, the moon slid into place, and the faces appeared. Dozens of them, hundreds, pressing outward, watching. The one that knew. Then one face was different. It looked younger. Its eyes were wide with fear, but when it spotted the kids below, its expression shifted into relief. It opened its mouth and spoke, not aloud, inside their heads. "Help us." Trevor staggered backward. "It's talking." Then Evan felt it. A pressure behind his eyes. A pulling sensation like something was trying to remember him. The face smiled again. This time, it wasn't friendly. "You saw us. Now you belong to us." The shadow inside the tower, the humming grew louder. The ladder on the side of the tower rattled violently. From inside the metal, something moved, not a face, but a shape behind them all. Massive and dark, shifting like a living shadow. The faces screamed. The tower shook, and the kids ran. The first one taken. They didn't notice Cole fall behind. Not until they reached the gas station and turned. Around, Cole was gone. The tower stood silent. Again, smooth, empty. No faces, no sound, just moonlight reflecting off rusted metal. The next morning, Cole's bike was found at the base of the tower, bent, wet, then covered in handprints. From the inside, asterisk. No one slept in Dry Creek after Cole vanished. His parents said he'd run away. The sheriff said there was no evidence of foul play. The water tower stood exactly as it always had trusted. Quiet, harmless, but Evan, Maya, and Trevor knew the truth. Because that night, all three of them dreamed the same dream. The dream of drowning. They were standing inside the water tower, not climbing it, not looking at it inside. The air was wet and cold. The curved metal walls pulsed slowly, like the inside of a lung. Water covered the floor ankle deep, rippling though nothing moved. Faces pressed out from the walls on every side. Hundreds of them, and among them Cole. His face was clearer than the rest, less distorted. His eyes were wide with terror, mouth opening and closing as if he were trying to scream through water. He lifted a hand, pressed it against the metal. Bang! Dot! All three kids woke up gasping at the exact same moment. 12:04 a.m. Cole isn't gone at school. Evan noticed something wrong. Cole's desk was still there. His name was still on the attendance list, but no one mentioned him. When Evan asked the teacher where Cole was, she frowned in confusion. Who? Maya overheard. She went pale at lunch. Trevor checked his phone. Every photo with Cole in it had changed. Where Cole once stood, there was now a blur like a smudge on the screen. In one picture, the blur looked almost like a face pressed against glass. That evening, Evan's mom asked him something that made his blood run cold. Do you hear running water at night? She asked casually. Sometimes, Evan said. She nodded slowly. Me too. Like it's coming from the walls. The tower is filling Dry Creek. Hadn't seen rain in months. Yet water pressure across town began to rise. Faucets dripped brownish liquid that smelled metallic. Toilets refilled on their own. Sprinklers activated at midnight without being programmed. The water tower was filling, but no one was pumping water into it at night. Evan could hear something else. Nass soft knocking sounds echoing through the pipes. 3 taps, always 3. The message on the 3rd night after Cole disappeared. Maya called Evan in tears. My mirror, she whispered. There's writing on it. Evan ran to her house with Trevor close behind. In the fogged bathroom mirror, words had been traced from the inside, as if written by wet fingers. Let us ORT then, slowly. Another message appeared beneath it. He is with us. The sink turned on by itself. The water that poured out was dark and thick. Maya screamed when a face briefly formed in the stream, Cole's face. The truth about the tower the kids broke into the town. Records room at the old municipal building. They found blueprints from 1952. The water tower hadn't always been just a water tower. It was built over a sealed sinkhole, a place where something had been discovered during construction, something that echoed human thought and reflected identity. The solution hadn't been to destroy it. They trapped it, encased it in metal, and fed it. Reflections, faces, people, children who looked too long, children who noticed midnight. One last time, Ivan, Maya, and Trevor stood at the base of the water tower at 11:59 p.m. The air vibrated with humming. The tower's surface rippled like disturbed water. Faces emerged everywhere. Now far more than before, Cole's face was front and center. He wasn't screaming. He was smiling. You can stay. His voice echoed inside their heads. It doesn't hurt after a while. The ladder shook violently. The shadow inside the tower pressed outward, massive and eager. The water level gauge spun wildly. The tower was overfilling. Trevor yelled, if it needs faces, then let it drown. They opened the emergency release valve. The flood water exploded from the base of the tower. Flooding the desert ground, the tower screamed. Not metal voices, faces warped, stretched, and dissolved as the pressure dropped. The shadow inside recoiled, collapsing inward. The humming cut off instantly. Silence fell by morning. The tower was empty. Dry. Dead. Goal was never found. But the town remembered him again. His name returned to records. Photos were normal. Teachers spoke of him in past tense. The final rule, the water tower, was dismantled months later. But Dry Creek still has a rule, a real one now. Never look at still water at night. Because sometimes, when the house is quiet and the lights are off, Evan swears he sees a familiar face staring back at him from the sink. Not screaming, not asking for help, just smiling, waiting for someone else to look too long. Asterisk. Story 7. The Lantern Man of Maple Hollow. Maple Hollow was the kind of town where streetlights flickered and trees leaned in close. A place where every night felt longer than it should. But the kids knew something the adults didn't. Something. Walked in the woods at night, they called it the Lantern Man. The legend no one remembered exactly when the sightings started. Some said it had been there since the town was founded. Others claimed it appeared only when someone dared to leave their home after dark. The rules were simple. Never walk near the woods alone at night. Never follow the lantern's glow. Never speak of it if you survive. A sighting. Asterisk. The Lantern Man carried a single swinging lantern. Its light was pale, almost bluish, and it moved without rhythm as if it had its own will. If you saw it, it always seemed closer the next night. The first encounter it was Leela and Jonah, ages 11 and 10, who broke the rule. They had been dared by older kids to retrieve a lost ball from the edge of the woods. It was jam 11:57 p.m. When they stepped past the tree line, the wind was still. The forest smelled damp. Then they saw it. A flicker of light weaving between the trees. A soft, hollow glow, just enough to show the outline of a tall figure. Do we go back? Leela whispered. Jonah shook his head. No, just get the ball and run. But as they approached the clearing, the glow swung toward them, not moving like a human, but gliding. And in that moment, they saw it. The Lantern Man's face, well, what should have been a face, was nothing but darkness. Its head was smooth, blank, featureless. But somehow it was looking straight at them. The lantern in its hand illuminated the mist around it, showing only empty forest behind it. The pull of the lantern. Leela froze. Jonah wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't move. The Lantern Man swung the light in a slow circle, and with it came a faint hum. It was not a sound humans could make, but it carried a message anyway. Come closer. You belong. The hum vibrated through their bones. The closer they looked, the further the clearing seemed to stretch. The ball lay near a hollow stump. Jonah stepped forward, his hand trembling. As he grabbed it, the lantern moved, toward him faster now. Leela screamed and pulled him back. The hum intensified. It sounded like thousands of whispers layered on top of each other. The Lantern Man paused. Then the lantern light flared, brighter than the moon. The first child taken when the light faded. Jonah was gone. Leela blinked. The clearing was empty. Only the ball lay in the soft moss. No footprints. No signs of struggle. She ran back home, heart hammering, crying. Her parents dismissed her fears. Just a dream, they said. But she knew. Jonah had been taken, and the Lantern Man had marked her. Signs and warnings after that night. Leela began noticing small, chilling signs. Asterisk shadows stretching too long along the walls. Her reflection in mirrors, seeming slightly delayed. Asterisk a faint blue glow in the forest. Whenever the wind was still, then came the letters, small scraps of paper, folded neatly, left on her doorstep. They contained only one word each night. Near. Come, waiting. The last one was accompanied by a tiny lantern, no bigger than a matchstick, glowing with the same pale blue light she had seen in the woods. The plan to save Jonah by the third night. Leela knew she had to act. She convinced two of her friends, Seth and Marcy, to venture to the clearing with her. The plan was desperate. Bring torches, stay together, do not look directly at the lantern. Man, asterisk, retrieved Jonah. They approached the forest carefully. Every step deeper, the air grew colder. Mist rose from the damp ground at exactly 12:01 a.m. The glow appeared. It hovered mid-air, larger than before, swinging gently as if taunting them. Leela gripped her torch. Her friends did the same. The lantern man moved closer, no sound. No legs visible, just the glow and the void where its face should be. It stopped, and in a voice that wasn't quite human, almost inside their heads, it said, "You cannot leave. Not yet." Cliffhanger ending part 1. The lantern man swung its light toward them. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the forest floor. Mist coiled around their legs. Lila felt Jonah's presence not behind her, but inside the light itself. And then, the hum of thousands of voices rose, all whispering their names at once. The forest seemed to close in. Lila's last thought before the glow engulfed them. We are too small, too slow, too human. Asterisk, the glow swallowed Lila, Seth, and Marcy completely. The fog became thick, like water pressing against their skin. Their torches barely cut through the pale blue light, and the forest seemed to stretch farther than human eyes could see. Then came the whispers, not voices of the living, not quite human, thousands of them. Every word their names, echoing from every direction. Leela, Seth, Marcy. Come closer. Leela's hand trembled as she held it tight to her chest. She felt Jonah not behind them, not in front, but inside the light itself, somewhere between reality and the impossible. The true form, the lantern man, emerged fully. No legs, no torso, only a darkness shaped like a man, elongated and impossible. Its lantern floated in front of it, swinging in slow, deliberate arcs. The flame was pale blue, and inside it faces swirled like mist, trapped in glass. Hundreds of children, all pressed in silent terror. The figure leaned forward. Its voice, inside their heads, became louder. You saw us. You belong to us. And your friend. It paused. Leela felt Jonah's presence scream silently. Is ours. The lantern man raised the lantern higher. The glow expanded, wrapping the trees, the ground, and the children in light. The shadows melted and twisted as if the forest itself were alive. The escape plan, Seth shouted. Run. Don't look at it. They obeyed. They sprinted blindly through the fog, branches clawing at their faces, roots tripping them. Every step, the lantern glided forward, faster than thought. Following the rhythm of their fear, Marcy screamed as she stumbled. A shadow coiled around her ankle, pulling, but she tore free. They reached the creek that cut through Maple Hollow, the water reflecting the lantern's eerie glow. Lila realized it hated water. Every reflection of the lantern in the rippling creek made it hesitate. Jump. Lila yelled. They leaped into the shallow water, splashing violently. The lantern man screeched, a sound like metal tearing and children screaming at once, and recoiled. Jonah's fater crossed the creek in the center of the lantern's glow. Jonah appeared, or something wearing him. He was pale, his eyes wide, but unnaturally still. His mouth moved, repeating words he had never said. Join us. Join us. Lila ran toward him, reaching. He whispered softly, his real voice barely audible beneath the lantern man's hum. Go. Save yourselves. The figure had claimed him. Not dead, not alive, but trapped inside the lantern, a warning of what happened if the children had lingered. Leela, Seth, and Marcy turned and ran. They didn't look back. The curse spreads by the time dawn arrived. The forest was empty. The mist lifted. The trees looked normal again. But something had changed in Maple Hollow. The fog lingered longer each night. Children began to disappear briefly, returning hours later, silent and pale, claiming they had walked in a dream. The creek's reflection sometimes showed faces that weren't there. Leela and her friends never returned to the clearing. They never spoke openly about that night, but they knew the Lantern Man was still there, waiting for anyone who strayed too close. The final warning years later. Lila returned as an adult, walking past the old forest edge. She stopped, seeing a faint glow between the trees. A single lantern swinging slowly. No figure visible, only the soft, hollow hum. Her reflection in the glass of a nearby abandoned window rippled on inside it. She saw a featureless black face staring back, whispering her name. "Come closer." Lila ran, and so the Lantern Man waits, waiting for the next child to wander into Maple Hollow at night. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Terramouth.